I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the case of the Menendez brothers and their fight for freedom. They've gone from potential death penalties to life without parole to now parole hearings. Here's the story. Erik and Lyle Menendez were once the golden sons of Beverly Hills, born into privilege and prestige. But on August 20th, 1989, their world shattered when they brutally gunned down their wealthy parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, in the family's mansion. The brothers claim they acted in self-defense after years of alleged sexual, physical, and emotional abuse at the hands of their father, a powerful Hollywood executive. Prosecutors painted a different picture. Two greedy sons eager to inherit a $14 million fortune. Their lavish spending after the murders, Rolex watches, luxury cars, and expensive nights out, only fueled public outrage. The first trial ended in a mistrial, the second in matching life sentences without parole. Decades later, the Menendez brothers gained renewed attention through documentaries, TikTok trends, and calls for a re-examination of the abuse allegations. Behind bars since 1996, the Menendez brothers now get ready to face the parole board. So there was a huge resentencing hearing. Now, for whatever reason, in a case that's been so public and has impacted the public so much, they kept cameras out from being inside for that hearing. But afterwards, and the victory for the Menendez brothers, Mark Garagos spoke. Let's take a listen.
On a day like today, that redemption is possible. And to those you saw X-rated talk today, you saw kind of the ridiculous nature of the cross-examination. You can turn anything on its head. The fact is, the Menendez brothers have done remarkable work, and today is a great day after 35 years. It's astonishing to me that, and I think we talked about it on the record, that it's a unicorn-style situation where you have horrific crimes that nobody is walking away from, but also remarkable, almost unparalleled rehabilitation and redemption. The focus of an 1172, which is the resentencing hearing, because the public seems to get a lot of disinformation, frankly, coming out of the DA's office, but the focus of 1172 is on redemption. The focus of 1172 is the legislature has spoken that they want to encourage rehabilitation.
What's incredible about all this is that they were facing the death penalty. And after being convicted of double murder, they got an opportunity and got a break, right? Life without the possibility of parole, but that doesn't mean life without the possibility of parole anymore, apparently, in California. So the Menendez brothers now won this resentencing and will have parole hearings. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation tonight, which is, what's going to happen at the parole hearing? What happens? What's the standard of proof? Who's allowed to speak? What's going to happen here? We need someone who can answer that question. We've got the perfect person to do it. The Los Angeles County District Attorney, former Assistant U.S. Attorney General, and former federal prosecutor Nathan Hochman is with us. Nathan, thanks so much for coming back. We always appreciate your time. I know you're busy in L.A. dealing with a lot of stuff, so we appreciate your time. So how would you explain this process to someone? Like, what is going to happen at this parole hearing for each of the brothers?
So at the parole hearing, which is going to happen over 2 days, I believe starting August 21st and 22nd, is that the parole board's going to take evidence. They're going to look at a whole variety of factors. In fact, they come up with their own report called a comprehensive risk assessment. And the parole board's going to look at the same factors that ultimately the governor is going to consider. That'll be, for instance, the age of the Menendez brothers when they committed these crimes. They're on certainly the young side, 18 and 21 at the time. They're going to look at their education levels. They're going to look at what they've been doing in prison. Have they taken advantage of rehab programs, which they have? Have they taken advantage of educational opportunities, which they have? But the parole board's experts, the expert psychologists, they raise the threat level, sort of the risk level of their comprehensive risk assessment from low to medium, because awaiting this resentencing, both Menendez brothers have engaged in a variety of actions in the prison that have violated the rules. They admitted to, for instance, bringing in cell phones into the prisons, which doesn't sound like a very big rule violation until you realize that every prison call is monitored and on purpose. They want to make sure that people don't bring drugs into the prison. And sure enough, the Menendez brothers have done that. They want to make sure that people don't engage in tax violations. The Menendez brothers have admitted that. They want to make sure that people, again, don't use an unregulated, unrecorded cell phone to do nefarious stuff, because why else would you use it if you know that it violates the rules? And as a result, the comprehensive risk assessment did not say that the Menendezes don't have some factors heavily in their favor granting parole, but they basically are saying that no, they now pose a moderate risk of future illegal conduct. And if I had to then interpret that, the answer is not now. That the Menendezes should not be given the parole at this first parole hearing, and only 14% of people who are up for their first parole hearing actually get the parole board to recommend parole. And finally, it goes to the governor, because whatever the parole board does, the governor of California, Governor Newsom, has the final say. If he wants to let the Menendez brothers out, he can. If he wants to keep them in prison till their next parole hearing, he absolutely can do that as well.
So who, at the actual parole hearing, is there sworn testimony from other people? Is it documents that the parole board is looking at? Are they looking at reports? Do prosecutors have a voice in all this? Because obviously the victims are gone, and family members who supported the prosecution of them, I think most of them are gone as well.
So prosecutors definitely have a voice before the parole board. The victim family members, the Menendez family members, will have a voice. The Menendez brothers obviously can make statements both in writing and orally to the parole board if they so choose. They're going to look at these expert reports. They're going to look at letters from prison officials. They're going to look at any type of information that will bear on whether or not the Menendez brothers pose a risk of danger to society. And one of the factors that they're going to look at is, have the Menendez brothers fully accepted responsibility for all the crimes and all the lies that they've been telling for the past 30 years. And one of the big issues we made clear at court, and have made it to the parole board as well, and ultimately the governor is going to have to consider this as well, is that the Menendezes at trial, they adopted the self-defense defense. They basically said that they believed that on the night of August 20th, 1989, that their parents were going to murder them that night, both their mom and their dad. So they had to brutally shoot them with shotguns 13 times in order to prevent their parents from murdering them. We have gone through the evidence, whether it's buying shotguns in San Diego rather than Los Angeles under a fake name, whether it was staging a pre-planned alibi for the killings, whether it was methodically actually executing their parents to make it look like a mafia hit by shooting their dad through the back of his head, their mother through point blank range as she lied dying on the floor, and putting the shotgun that they had to reload up to her cheek, or shooting the parents through the kneecaps and staging it as a mafia hit. We basically said that the self-defense defense has been a lie for 30 years. The Menendez brothers have never owned up to that defense, as well as a whole variety of other lies that they told. And therefore, the issue is that since they have not fully shown complete insight into their crimes and lies, they're not ready to be released. When and if they do show that type of insight, we have said that we will reconsider our approach to whether or not the Menendez has been released, but that has not happened yet, despite us putting that at issue for the last 6 months.
Yeah, I've never heard of premeditated self-defense. That just doesn't, that's not a thing, right? That's just not a thing. I want to put this up on the screen real quick because you mentioned it. The hearing dates, and these are important dates, folks, August 21st and 22nd. That's in front of the parole board. And if the board determines that they are eligible, then it's the governor, Gavin Newsom, who must have the final say in all of this. So you mentioned the governor, Nathan, and obviously this is a governor. I don't want to get into politics here, but there is politics involved to a certain extent when you have someone who very well may be running for president of the United States. What's your sense of the way the public perceives the Menendez brothers these days? Would it be a popular decision to let them go or an unpopular decision?
You know, the Menendez case, which was televised, obviously, in the early 90s, got a revival through the Netflix documentary and limited series, through the TikTok showing of clips of the Menendez's trial. One of the things that I did, in my office did, is if you go to the LA DA's website, da.lacounty.gov, you can see a 16-minute timeline that we put together that analyzes not only the crime that was committed, but the entire judicial process, from investigation to the 2 trials, to the 5 appeals, to the various resentencing, habeas, and clemency petitions that exist today. So if you have to ask me where the governor comes in this, again, if the governor's prior decisions are any indication, then you would look at the Sirhan decision. That decision, made about 3 years ago, was whether or not the parole board, who had granted Sirhan parole on his 16th time up for parole, would actually have that parole sustained by the governor. He actually reversed that grant of parole, even noting that Sirhan was 78, had been in prison for 54 years, was 24 when he committed the crime, completed every rehab program you can complete in prison, and otherwise was a model prisoner. But he said that Sirhan had not shown complete and full responsibility for his underlying actions of killing Robert F. Kennedy. And he said because of that, even though he had a lot of pro-parole factors in his favor, he was going to deny Sirhan based on this lack of insight. So the question will be whether or not the governor uses that standard, lack of insight, as sort of the ultimate trump card to decide that he won't grant the Menendezes their parole this first time out, or whether or not he'll find the other factors more compelling and decide to grant them parole. You'll just have to stay tuned and see what happens in that 90-day period that the governor will have to make this decision.
All right. Wow. It's amazing that we've gotten to this point, but we'll see. Thank you so much, Nathan Hochman, the district attorney for LA County. Thank you so much, sir. Great to see you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right. More to get to. Coming up next. Were the Menendez brothers actually sexually molested?
My dad.
Can you answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, it was you telling Lyle what?
My dad had been molesting me.
This week.
Join us each morning to get trial ready for the day's proceedings. Plus, deeper dives into true crime stories with our daily spotlight.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Donna Adelson is facing charges of murder, the death of her former son-in-law.
Terrible. Now that Donna has turned into a defendant, what's next for the Adelson clan?
The Matriarch Mastermind murder trial. Live coverage this August on Court TV.
For many years, I struggled with terms with what happened to my sister's family. It was a nightmare none of us could have imagined. But as details of Lyle and Eric's abuse came to light, it became clear that their actions, while tragic, were the desperate response of 2 boys trying to survive the unspeakable cruelty of their father.
When the first trial aired on Court TV years ago, before the O.J. Simpson case, and you may not remember, you may remember it very vividly, but there was the big debate. The big debate in the trial was about what happened to the Menendez brothers. Was what they were saying in court the truth about what their lives were like? For those of you who don't recall, or those of you who need to be reminded about that testimony, let's take a listen to Erik and Lyle Menendez here talking about the abuse they say came from their own father. Let's listen.
My dad.
Your Honor, can I ask a leading question?
If you don't ask.
My dad.
Wait 1 second, Mr. Menendez. Okay, let me ask.
No, he was in the process of answering, so there's no need to ask him.
Can you answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, it was you telling Lyle what?
My dad had been molesting me.
I asked him what was the matter, and at some point, he couldn't tell me, and he just started crying. And I said, you can tell me, what is it? And he told me that those things with his dad were still going on. I felt like, why didn't I do anything about it?
Like he was blaming you somehow?
Maybe. He wasn't, but I felt that way.
Were you blaming you?
Yes. And also feeling guilty when I asked him if he liked it. And
what did he do when you asked him if he
I was
liked
angry. What?
What did he do when you asked him if he liked it?
What did he do?
Yes.
He said, of course he didn't like it. And he just, I don't remember exact words, but he was crying. And I told him, I believed him. And I did believe him.
Why did you believe him? You didn't believe him at first.
Rephrase the question.
Did you believe him at first?
Not really. I wasn't sure. I just didn't. It was the shock of it. That was just my response.
What made you believe him?
Just the way he was talking about it. Just his tears and, it was obvious that it was true. And I just didn't feel my brother was going to, there was no reason to lie. Clearly, he was coming to me, wanted me to do something about it. And it was true, because, my dad never denied it when I talked to him about it.
And all that testimony, that issue, not a part of the second trial. It was different. The second trial was different. Also, the second trial wasn't televised, so we never got to see it. But that was the first case, right? The pastel sweaters and the story. And that's what the national debate was about as the nation was watching this trial. What happened to the Menendez brothers? Were they making this up? And it really broke down on gender lines. Like, the men didn't believe him, the women did believe him. Same thing happened in the jury room. 6 men didn't believe him, 6 women did believe them. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Were they actually sexually molested? Here to help with our investigation, Joel Waldman, host of the very popular Surviving the Survivor podcast, and digital journalist Justin Shepard, who has worked directly with the family of the Menendez brothers. Thank you both for being here. Let me start here. Justin, what's your answer to that question? Do you believe that they were actually sexually molested, and what's the basis of your belief?
Yeah, so the answer to your question, the short answer is yes, I do believe that they were. And there's a few different facets as to why. First of all, let's start with the fact that the entire family, every living family member is on their side. They believe them. You have 2 cousins that found journal entries and then a letter about the abuse long before the murders ever took place. On top of that, when you're talking about when this happened 35, 36 years ago, you didn't have the internet. You didn't have the ability to just go research, how do I fake trauma? How do I fake that I was abused? And their story stayed consistent the entire time. Like you said, they were consistent during the first trial. The second trial, they weren't really allowed to bring that up. And like you said, it wasn't televised. But they've been consistent the entire time. And then the other thing, too, is when you look at the experts that have taken a look at this case, who have spoken with them, with all the hindsight that we now have, everything that they did, even after the fact, up to and including the spending spree that they went on, all correlates with a trauma response.
Joel, let's take a listen to the cousin, Andy Cano, from the first trial. This is his testimony about this issue.
He was actually trying to find out if any of these massages were normal.
What did he say about where the massages were?
Well, he told me his father was massaging his.
He used that word?
Yes, he did.
So, Joel, what are your thoughts about this issue of whether they were actually sexually molested? Because I remember, you know, when the first trial happened, I'm a little older than you guys, but I remember the public debate and how some people believed, some people didn't, came basically down gender lines. I think the world has changed since then. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the perception of, you know, about sexual assault, sexual abuse has completely changed. It was not really allowed in, as you said, in the second trial, and was suppressed even in the first trial. We've had Dr. Ann Burgess on our show who interviewed Erik and has no doubt, according to her, that what she told him correlates with sexual abuse. You've got Roy Rossello from Menudo, who has come forward to say that he too was abused by Jose Menendez. And then the Andy Cano letter that Justin just mentioned, not to mention 20 family members. And I've got to tell you, I have a personal connection to this story. I grew up playing tennis with Lyle and Erik at the East Brunswick Racket Club. I wasn't there, but friends of mine were at a party of theirs one night, and someone spilled wine on a white carpet, and the reaction they had was not a normal reaction. It's something my friends and I still talk to about this day. It was almost like my father's going to kill me, but really kill me. They were very fearful. Again, something we talk about. A lot of people I know were subpoenaed and testified at the original trial, so it hits home a little bit differently, but something was definitely off, in my opinion.
And just a quick follow-up, Joel. So what was the reaction of that group of people who knew them when this trial happened and all these allegations became public? Did it make sense that, oh, okay, something terrible was happening in that house?
Yeah, it was sort of an aha moment. We had the same tennis coach guy named Brad Warner, and I don't want to make this about myself, but obviously it's important in light of this story. And we would all, you know, talk about things. And at one point, obviously, they moved to Los Angeles, so they were a little bit far removed. And when the trial did happen, all of us did speak to each other, and we said, wow, that might be the reason they reacted the way they did that night that everyone was at that party. Again, I was not there for that, but I would talk to them. They were much better tennis players. They were on court one. I was always on court two. But we would talk occasionally. And again, something just didn't seem right. And I remember even back then, people talking about the father just being overly domineering.
All right, Joel Waldman, Surviving the Survivor, thank you so much. Justin's going to stick around. Up next, should Erik be released before Lyle? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the case of the Menendez brothers and their fight for freedom. From facing death to life to potential release on parole. Here's the story. Decades after being convicted of murdering their parents, Lyle and Erik Menendez are once again in the spotlight, this time fighting for their freedom. Serving life without parole since 1996, the brothers claim their actions were not driven by greed, but by years of sexual and psychological abuse at the hands of their father, Jose Menendez. Now, after winning their resentencing in court, the brothers have a chance for freedom. They will be facing a parole board this summer, making their cases for a life outside of prison, a life free from imprisonment after their double murder convictions. So there has been some news relative to the Menendez brothers outside of their upcoming parole hearings, which is the biggest news they could have ever dreamed about after being convicted of double murder, facing a potential death sentence. And it has to do with the condition of Erik Menendez. Take a look. The attorney, Mark Garagos, says that Erik should get a prison furlough. Garagos says that Erik has been diagnosed with a, quote, serious medical condition. Erik's daughter, Talia, posts on social media that her father has complications with both kidneys, having multiple large kidney stones. He had his second surgery after he was transported from prison to a hospital, and he will need a third surgery. Prison officials said that Erik was in fair condition at the hospital. So it seems like right now, at least physically, he's in a different state than his brother is. And the attorney is saying he should get a furlough at this point, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. Should Erik be released before Lyle? Right? There's something going on with Erik's condition right now, but there's also a difference. Two different people, both going before the parole board, but they are separate individuals with their own separate issues and separate lives. Should Erik be released before Lyle? Here to help answer the question, former Deputy Public Defender for Los Angeles County, Philip Dubé, and criminal defense attorney Edwina Elcox. Thank you both for being here. Let's do this. I'm going to play, just before we answer the question, let's listen to some of Erik and Lyle's testimony from the trial, because again, two people facing the parole board, but they are two separate individuals, despite the fact that they're co-defendants and brothers. Let's listen.
What else did she say Saturday night that was not part of this standard upset thing that she'd say?
She told me that if I would have kept my mouth shut, things might have worked out in the family.
What did you think that meant?
That meant that things had not worked out in the family, and I believed that she was going to kill us.
Well, things had not worked out in the family, and whose fault was that?
Mine, because I had told Lyle.
And keeping your mouth shut, what did you think she meant? Shut about what?
About the stuff between Dad and I, and that I had told Lyle.
And what did you think she meant by things not working out in the family? The family had had problems before of one kind or another, like all families, hadn't it?
Usually there was a lot of argument in these when she would say there had not been anything. Since Thursday night, there had been no arguments on Friday, no arguments on Saturday, and suddenly she was coming up with this statement that the family was through, and I really thought I knew what that meant.
I just grabbed a bunch of ammunition out of the box, and I was giving him ammunition, and we were just loading as fast as possible. And,
Do you remember how many shells you loaded? Do you know?
I don't remember. I remember pulling out all kinds of shells and just loading my gun and having shells on me.
What did you do then?
My brother had, I guess, got outside through the study doors because he ran toward the study window door. And you had to kind of go over this. I think we went over the little concrete thing. It was over to the side of the door on the left. And we went through that door and we just sprinted to the room, hoping to get there when they were not expecting us.
What did you do after you reloaded?
I ran around and shot my mom.
Where did you shoot her?
I just reached over and I shot her close.
Okay, Philip Dubé, what are your thoughts here? Do you think that Erik should be released before Lyle? They should be treated separately?
It's a legal question, and I'll tell you why. If Mr. Garagos filed a petition for resentencing, there's a provision in California that allows essentially for what we call a compassionate release, meaning the sentence gets recalled, they get resentenced, but there has to be a very specific showing, meaning that the chief of staff for the parole medical unit has to certify to the court that the inmate is in a very advanced sort of end-of-life stage of disease. And typically we see this in cases such as ALS, cancer, dementia, and organ failure. So if a showing could be made that Erik's kidney disease is so advanced that it really renders the prison incapable of tending to him, and that it interferes with his daily activities like just dressing, eating, toileting, bathing, just getting up every day. Prisons are not a nursing home. They're not assisted living facilities. The court can grant it. And if that's the case, I think Erik's health comes first. The courts and the prisons do not evaluate co-defendants' suitability for parole and release in the aggregate. They're not conjoined. They are separate individuals, and you have to view and assess their suitability for release based on their own individual merits and needs. And if he meets the medical criteria, they should let him out and be treated with dignity.
Now, Edwina, I want to put something else in the mix here to distinguish the brothers. This is from the LA Times, 1995 article from the second trial without the cameras. The former fiancé of Lyle Menendez testified Wednesday that he told her his father and mother were killed by the mob, then later confessed in jail that he had killed them because his mother sexually abused him and because his father abused his brother. James Pisarcik, a former tennis pro who spent 4 years in an on and off relationship with Lyle, also testified that the elder Menendez brother tried to bribe her to testify falsely at his first murder trial. In December of 1990, Lyle proposed that she help his defense by suggesting that Jose Menendez had made sexual advances towards her. Lyle promised that a large sum of money would be deposited in my bank account, she said. Does that make things different, that he tried to get someone to commit perjury on his behalf?
I think, well, in the eyes of the Parole Commission and the folks that makes these decisions, there is always the question of taking responsibility and accountability. And I think that we've seen time and time and time again across the nation where people have been denied the opportunity for parole, where they've maintained innocence, which is different than the defense that has been asserted here, but where people have been denied the opportunity at parole because they haven't taken accountability or true accountability, whatever that means in the eyes of the parole board.
All right, Philip Dubé, we have about 20 seconds left here. Lyle Menendez at the first trial also testified about molesting his brother Erik. Should that be a factor, and is that another reason why perhaps Erik should get out before Lyle?
No, because the facts of the underlying criminal case are not an element for purposes of determining suitability and eligibility for release, either on parole or at resentencing. The real question is how he performed in prison, his health, whether or not he's picked up any crimes, and whether or not he will be a danger to the public, meaning will he ever commit what we call in California a super strike? And there is zero evidence of that, so they should absolutely let him out.
If he's committed a sexual offense against his brother, wouldn't that make him a little more risky?
But has he done anything since then? Remember, this was 30-some-odd years ago.
Gotcha. Philip Dubé, Edwina Elcox, great to have you both on the show. Thank you so much. Still to come, what will the Menendez brothers do when they get out?
This week.
Join us each morning to get trial ready for the day's proceedings. Plus, deeper dives into true crime stories with our daily spotlight.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Donna Adelson is facing charges of murder, the death of her former son-in-law.
This is terrible. Now that Donna has turned into a defendant, what's next for the Adelson clan?
The matriarch mastermind murder trial. Live coverage this August on Court TV.
I've known Lyle and Erik my whole life. I can tell you without a doubt that they are not the villains they've been portrayed as. They were boys, young, scared, and abused by their father in ways no child should ever experience. You, the media, focus so much on their actions, but they never were told, they never were able to tell the full story of their abuse that drove them to such desperate measures. When I think about the pain and suffering they endured, it breaks my heart to know that the system failed them so profoundly. They tried to protect themselves the only way they knew how. But instead of being seen as victims, they were vilified.
Well, they did get an opportunity to tell their story. They told it to the first jury, and they convinced half of them. They didn't convince the other half of the jury. But they did get that opportunity. So that's interesting. But it's an important perspective coming from the family, right? Because they do have family on the outside. I want you to take a listen to some testimony again from the trial. This is from Glenn Stevens, who was Lyle's friend at the time, years ago, talking about the behavior of the Menendez brothers after the double murder.
After the memorial service, you went shopping?
Yes, very often.
Okay. What did you shop for?
A Porsche, real estate, 2 condominiums and a patio home, clothes, things of that nature.
And that was one of the big criticisms and you know, the way the public looked at it. 2 kids, Beverly Hills, murdered their parents allegedly at the time. They were convicted, and then go on a shopping spree. That's what they did after the wake, but what happens now? I mean, they're up for parole, and chances are they very well both could be released. And that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What will the Menendez brothers do when they get out? What do? You go to prison in your early 20s and now you get out, you know, more than 35 years later. Here to help with our investigation is journalist and host of Crime Writers On podcast, Rebecca Lavoie, and still with us, Justin Shepard, who's worked directly with the family of the Menendez brothers. Let me ask you, Justin, first, is the family prepared to help them if they get out?
Yeah, great question, and they absolutely are. I think it's very safe to say that Lyle and Erik have a very strong support system. They're surrounded by family that is very willing to help take them on and help them readjust to the world, because it is a very different world than when they went in prison or in jail in 1989, in prison ever since. So yeah, I think that they have a very strong support system behind them.
You know, Rebecca, I was trying to think, you know, what are they going to do? And we've seen people in this position do different things. I look at them, and I'm not trying to be funny here. I'm being honest about what I could potentially see them doing, which is getting into the world that all of us are in, right? The world of podcasting. They obviously have a perspective and a story to tell that people would be very interested in. The other thing, pickleball. I can honestly see them playing a lot of pickleball. They were both really good tennis players. I know that a lot of prisoners now are playing. I could see that as a recreation. They could be a doubles team if they're healthy enough to do it. But Rebecca, what do you see? What happens to the Menendez brothers if and when they get out?
Well, I don't see them starting a pickleball podcast, if that's kind of where you were going.
No,
with
not
that.
putting the two together, but separately. You know, having a recreational life and a professional life.
Absolutely. But I think that one of the things that these two men have demonstrated is that, you know, the data shows that when people commit crimes when they are in their late teens, early 20s, without that fully developed frontal lobe, they actually can undergo the reforms that prison was actually designed for. And the way that sentencing works here in the U.S. is that very often people are in prison for decades or even their whole life after they have become productive members of society. And I actually think, you know, knowing what Lyle and Erik have done in prison, my understanding is that Lyle has been a rep for other inmates to prison administration for like 20 years, that Erik is an artist, he's learned ASL, that he teaches, he's worked in hospice in the prison. There's just no reason why these two men couldn't come out. And if they do decide to not lay low, you know, become advocates for things like sentencing reform and for victims of abuse.
Yeah, and that's where I think the podcast comes into play. I mean, that's part of one way to have your voice heard. Justin, what do we know about the status of their relationships? Because at least at some point, both were married. I think just one is married now. Do we know if the wives or ex-wives, whatever the situation is, are waiting for them to be released?
So I haven't really heard a lot about the wives and the ex-wives, and I know there's like a stepdaughter, I believe, in there as well, or stepchild. I'm not really sure about that. We haven't talked a lot about that. Most of my conversations have been with their direct family, like basically their cousins, the spokespeople for the family. But my understanding is, yeah, everybody for the most part that is surrounding them is waiting for them to be released, wants them to be released, feels that they're going to be productive members of society, kind of dovetailing off of what you guys were just talking about. You know, what they want to do first has nothing to do with attention or podcast. They want to see their family. And I know that they have 2 aunts that are getting old. Their Aunt Terry is battling cancer. I think she's stage 4. So that's a big concern for them. And then, you know, dovetailing off advocacy work, that's exactly what I understand that they want to do. So they want to get out, see their family, and really just try to make a difference, you know, to the world that they're going to be brought back out into, versus being somebody who's just like, hey, we're the Menendez brothers, you know, let's get famous from doing that. That doesn't really seem to be what they're looking towards.
And Rebecca, the world that they'll be re-entering is much different in terms of the way people perceive sexual abuse and the abuse of children, whether it's male, female, by a mother, a father, a relative, whatever it is. So that's a big change. So my guess is the public reception, while it's not going to be unanimously, they might get a warmer reception today than they would have gotten if they had been found not guilty years ago.
I think so. I mean, I think about even somebody who was acquitted, like Casey Anthony, who's now popping up in my home state of New Hampshire. And
congratulations! Enjoy that. Enjoy that, Rebecca.
Thank you very much. I don't really get the sense that Lyle and Erik Menendez are seen as the notorious villainous characters that they were portrayed to be by prosecutors when they went through their 2 trials. I imagine that they will be able, especially with some of the media and pop culture around them in the last couple of years, that they'll be able to come out if they're spotted, say, in, you know, TJ Maxx, as Casey Anthony was. I don't think someone's going to be taking their photo and talking about how evil they are on the internet. So, yeah, I mean, the world is really tough. I mean, any transition out of a long incarceration is tough, but I hope that they are able, if they get out, to avail themselves of the new culture that we live in now.
Yeah, and we have about 20 seconds left here, Justin. Final word from you. What are your thoughts about the reception that the public will give the Menendez brothers if they get out?
Yeah, so I think that it's mixed. You know, one thing that I've kind of discovered with social media is it really seems to be kind of like the halfway point of Gen X and younger is very much for the support of them getting out, very much advocating for them, where the older generations who saw what they saw on TV tend to be like, they're brutal murderers, they need to stay in jail for the rest of their lives. So it's really kind of a mixed sentiment, but I think overall they're going to probably be pretty well received.
Justin Shepard and Rebecca Lavoie, thank you both so much. Now, many believe, as Justin was saying, the Menendez brothers should be released. People are saying enough is enough. Even though, after killing their father, they had to reload to execute their mother. Even though they were no longer living at home. Even though they covered up their crimes and lied about them. Now, even though one of them tried to get witnesses to commit perjury. And even though they were adults when they did it, 18 and 21. Now the question is, will the parole board agree with those who want them set free? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.